Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is Brian Hook. He is the U.S. Special Representative for Iran. He's also a senior advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Mark.
Obviously, you've been focusing a lot on Iran. There's a new report leaked from the International Atomic Energy Agency, and you believe this is showing that Iran has restarted its nuclear activity, but without showing it.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Iranian regime is playing cat and mouse with the UN nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Association. There's two reports that have come out that show that Iran was denying access to inspectors. And they're also, they can't account for undeclared nuclear material in Iran. So this is concerning because Iran has lied about its past work on a nuclear weapon. They've also lied about shooting down the Ukrainian jetliner, and they've lied about coronavirus. So when the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism is hiding nuclear material from the world, everybody should be concerned.
Well, there's one thing is to hide. The other is aiming at building a nuclear weapon. Do you believe this is what Iran is doing? Because according to the report, there's only enrichment to a certain degree, but not to the level of a weapon. So, and this is reversible, as the Iranians have said repeatedly.
It is reversible, but over half of the countries in the world that have peaceful nuclear power don't enrich. So that's the first data point. Iran doesn't need to enrich. And it's a question that we should ask, given Iran's status as such a deep sponsor of terrorism. But the other point about this is that Iran, in about a year or two ago, Israel was able to discover a warehouse in the heart of Tehran that had half a ton of documents on how to build a nuclear weapon. So Iran has never come clean about its past work on a nuclear weapon. They hid that warehouse from the IAEA. So this is something which I'm here in Paris for talks with my British, French, and German counterparts.
Are they concerned?
Yes, we're all very concerned.
Because obviously this is a result of the decision by the Trump administration to pull out of the nuclear deal back in, that was sealed back in 2015. The Iranians have always, according to the IAEA, complied with this deal until you decided to pull out. So they're saying, well, why should we respect when the Americans decide not to respect the deal?
It's a fair question. What the IAEA is reporting are two separate issues. One, they're not in compliance with the Iran nuclear deal, but they're also not in compliance with the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which about 191 countries have signed up for, and that's how the international community prevents other countries from becoming nuclear weapon states. So on the Iran nuclear deal, they have breached the deal 5 times.
But you've abandoned it, so why not?
Well, we abandoned the deal because we didn't think the deal was going to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
But it's encouraging them to do so.
But here's an interesting point. The violations happening now that have concerned so many people are permitted under the deal in 11 years. This is a deal that expires. It's a temporary deal. In fact, the UN arms embargo on Iran expires in 8 months under the deal, and this deal is going to continue expiring. So they've violated it now. They're increasing the purity of their enrichment. They're increasing the stockpiling of enriched material. But what they're doing is permitted under the deal in 11 years.
Are they aiming at building a nuclear weapon?
Well,
Can you say that's what they're aiming at?
Iran was hiding a warehouse of material on how to build a nuclear weapon from the IAEA.
It's not the same thing as actually building one.
Right, but they are enriching, and they're enriching at levels that are very concerning.
Are you going to slap more sanctions on Iran? You've engaged in this maximal pressure policy. Are there more sanctions on the horizon against Iran?
There will be more sanctions on this regime because we have a policy of maximum pressure. And what this policy has been able to do is deny Iran the revenue it needs to fund terrorism around the world. We've also, because of our pressure, Iran's proxies like Hezbollah are weaker today. So are their Shia proxies in Syria and some other proxies. And so their military budget is down double digits. If you want to get after Iran's terrorism, you have to go after Iran's oil. They're inseparable. So we have collapsed Iran's oil exports and their petrochemical and others, but this is the right policy, and we've been successful.
Who are you going to target? Higher level officials than you actually did already?
Well, we recently sanctioned Ahmad Jannati, the chairman of the Guardian Council. He's the man who disqualified 7,000 moderates from running in Iran's the parliamentary elections. We've also put sanctions on a judge who was notorious for sentencing innocent people to prison, including some Americans and others. So we are going to continue targeting regime officials. We don't ever reveal in advance because
But you could aim higher than those people.
Yeah, we have sanctioned Iran's foreign minister. We've sanctioned a number of people because they are part of a hardline regime that even in places like Paris have attempted to conduct mass casualty attacks with bombing, the bombing at the MEK rally. So this is a regime that's conducted terrorism across 5 continents, and we've got to get serious about what this regime's up to.
So you've got to get serious about regime change. That's the official policy of the U.S.?
Never been the official policy of this administration. In fact, quite the opposite. So the future of Iran will be decided by the Iranian people. It will not be decided by the United States government.
Well, it seems that's what the aim is really to have this regime collapse.
If that were the aim, we wouldn't be asking for talks with the regime. But
Are you asking for talks?
For 3 years, we've been asking for talks.
They're saying they're willing to talk, and you're not willing to talk.
Well, French President Macron has done his level best to try to mediate and to get Iran to de-escalate. Iran is unwilling to talk unless they get sanctions relief. And President Trump's view is that he's not going to pay for diplomacy. He's not going to pay for a meeting with the Iranians. But we have said repeatedly—
He's negotiating with the Taliban. Why not the Iranians?
That's a question for the Iranians. So we have offered repeatedly. So since the time that the Iranians have rejected talks with the United States, President Trump has met with North Korea's Kim Jong-un 3 times. And so we've de-escalated things on the Korean Peninsula. And if Iran cared more about diplomacy than its proxies and its nuclear program and its missile program, we could get somewhere.
So you're still reaching out to them?
Very much so. Very much so.
Coronavirus in Iran. What's your take on this? Obviously, the U.S. has accused the regime of lying, has also offered help, maybe some kind of sanctions relief for some medicines to go into Iran. What's your position?
So, Mark, we made an offer to the regime of humanitarian assistance to help them close the medical gaps that exist dealing with this corona epidemic. And the United States is the largest provider of humanitarian assistance in the world. Throughout this regime's 40-year history, despite their chance of death to America, the United States has always offered assistance to the Iranian people on natural disasters or during a health crisis like we have now. The regime turned it down. They rejected our offer of humanitarian assistance.
Are you willing maybe to relieve some sanctions temporarily to allow some medical material to go into Iran?
Unfortunately, this regime has a bad history of diverting humanitarian assistance to make the regime richer, or they hijack it for their own purposes. So if we were to give sanctions relief, the regime would spend it the way they typically do, which is on Assad in Syria and on Hezbollah in Lebanon. So we know how to get humanitarian assistance to the Iranian people. Just a couple of weeks ago, working through the Swiss, we were able to get cancer treatment drugs into Iran. We can do a lot to help the Iranian people, but the regime needs to get out of the way and help them.
Could this coronavirus have effects on your policy towards Iran? The borders with Iraq, for instance, have been closed. Could this have geopolitical effects?
Well, it's already having the effects. A lot of the countries in the Middle East that have corona trace it to Iran not getting control of this epidemic.
Was it a mistake?
Yeah.
Or more than that?
Well, the regime shouldn't have held the elections. They knew that they had a coronavirus problem, and they went ahead with the elections.
They lied?
They did lie to their own people. But this is what the regime has been doing for 40 years. And the Iranian people know this. And so just in one day, from yesterday to today, the number of infections has gone up 1,000. And now there's 99 people who have died. 2 days ago, it was at 66. So this regime, from the very beginning, we asked them to just do a couple of basic things. Work with the World Health Organization. You don't need to work with us, that's fine. But you also need to be transparent with your own people so that they can take the necessary steps to protect themselves.
Right. Qasem Soleimani was killed by the U.S. Was this a one shot, or are you ready to aim directly, including killing some senior Iranian officials?
Well, the United States only takes military action in self-defense. And we have made clear for many years that if we are attacked...
That wasn't the case.
What was not the case?
Qasem Soleimani, why was it self-defense?
Well, Qasem Soleimani has killed over 600 Americans during the Iraq War. He is the one that orchestrated the attack on the Iraqi base that killed an American. And so he was in the region plotting mass casualty attacks against American diplomats and against American soldiers. We had very good intelligence on what he was up to. And the president, in order to protect American lives, took the necessary step. Everybody in the president's cabinet who saw the intelligence reached the same conclusion that not taking the strike would have been more dangerous than taking the strike.
So you would do it again?
That's a hypothetical that we don't need to sort of reach, but this is part of restoring deterrence against Iranian aggression. With this regime, accommodation invites aggression. And I think we lost deterrence under the Iran nuclear deal, but deterrence can be lost pretty quickly, and getting it back is the work of many years. And Iran, for now, the regime has stood down on attacks, and so have its proxies. That's part of restoring deterrence.
Brian Hogue, thank you very much for coming on the France 24 set, and thank you for watching this interview. Stay tuned for more news.